looking at what, at least for right now, Carol Massar, appears to be a bit of a round trip when it comes to financial markets, and S&P up 17% off of those April lows, and NASDAQ up 22%.
Yeah, like Liberation Day never happened. Hey, Mag 7 really outperforming today. All of them up in today's session, up about 5.6%. Our own Eric Weiner, though, reminding us that you take a look at a lot of the individual names, still down a lot for the year, and the group is still down. Tim, did I just say that?
Yeah, you called me Tim again.
That hurts. That hurts.
The group is down about 7.5% year to date. Matthew Miller.
They forget about the first husband so quickly, right?
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, this rally has been, I think, a really quiet rally. I was anchoring the opening bell this morning on Bloomberg Open Interest every weekday from 9 to 11, and you really didn't feel the excitement. You didn't feel the exuberance of a 3%, of a 4% gain, and yet it's held for the entire day, and the volume is up as well. I mean, it's not like it's a slow trading day. We're looking at 10% more volume than we have had over the last 30 days on average. So I guess we're just getting used to this kind of volatility.
It is volatility, but it also speaks to how perhaps people were not positioned for a positive outcome. They were likely more positioned for a negative outcome, especially when you take a look at how the dollar is trading, particularly against the yen.
Absolutely. Here, we should point out stocks closing out the session at the highs of the day. In fact, the highs of the day were set just about 2 minutes ago at 358, and S&P 500 posting a gain of more than 180 points or 3% on the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up almost 1,200 points, a gain on the day of about 2.8%, while the NASDAQ Composite adds about 800 points or 4.3%. And we should point out the small mid-cap stocks also getting a strong bid. Mid-caps up 3.5%, the Russell 2000 small caps up 3.5%, and Dow Transports, just to throw that in there, a gain on the day of 7%.
Yeah, a lot of areas of the market certainly gaining today. Hey, digging a little bit deeper into the S&P 500, guys, 409 names to the upside, Scarlet, and just 93 names losing some ground today.
All right, a very broad advance in the IMAP as well. This is the 11 sectors of the S&P 500. One sector in the red, and that is utilities, down about 0.6%, 0.7%. Classic defensive group getting sold off today because it's not a risk group. You also have real estate investment trusts and consumer staples lagging behind the broader market gains. The best performers are consumer discretionary, and that's really driven by the auto companies. Tech and communication services all gaining at least 3.5%.
All right, a lot of green there. Let's get to the number one gainer in the S&P 500. We're talking about NRG Energy. Man, that name is up about 26%, so pretty much holding on to all of its gains of the day. This is after agreeing to acquire the nat gas-powered assets from Ellis Power Equity Advisors. That was about a $12 billion deal, including debt. So really some outperformance there. Microchip, we saw the semiconductor space up overall, but Microchip up about 10% here. Also a top gainer in the NASDAQ 100. Citi raising the firm's price target on Microchip to 55 from 50 and keeping a buy rating on the shares, saying the company posted a decent quarter, but guided revenue up 8% quarter over quarter. That's the highest revenue growth in this sector. Again, the analysts over at Citi putting out a note. Apple, I mentioned the Mag 7 as a whole, rallying in today's session. Apple up about 6%. This is after the Wall Street Journal came out and said the company is considering raising iPhone prices, so that was certainly a catalyst. And Shopify, just had to mention, up almost 14%. This is after the NASDAQ announced late Friday after the close that the company would replace MongoDB in the NASDAQ 100 prior to market open on May 19th. So a bunch of gainers here. Over to Matthew Miller.
I'm looking at the losers today, and for much of the day, Newmont Mining was at the bottom of the list of the S&P 500. I don't think it closed as the biggest loser, but with gold down in the last three trading sessions, about $200, you could see why Newmont would sell off. Cigna and CVS are both owners of PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, which means they are the middleman that Donald Trump was talking about this morning. He said he wants to cut out the drug industry middleman as a way to reduce drug costs, and as a result, those shares getting sold off pretty hard. They were, at varying points, Cigna certainly the biggest loser of the day on the S&P 500. And then Kroger, I saw, was a big loser today. In fact, the grocer sold off the most in 2 years at one point today. They don't own a PBM anymore. They have in the past owned their own PBM and partnered up with PBM. You can still get pharmaceuticals at Kroger. They still have a pharmacy there. But in general, President Trump has been talking about bringing down the price of groceries. And I love the way he says that, groceries. And Kroger was not a beneficiary of that today.
How does one otherwise say it?
He just enunciates each and every syllable, groceries. And I just appreciate it. I don't know if it's a New York thing. Is that a normal thing for New Yorkers?
Groceries?
Groceries? I don't know. I say groceries. I grew up in New York. Anyway, to the bond market we go. You're seeing a sell-off pretty much all across the curve. That 2-year yield is up by 11 basis points, closing right at that 4% level. Here's kind of the why as we re-rate the Fed cuts. You're looking at swaps tracking the upcoming central bank meeting, showing just 56 basis points of easing by December, and that's down a whopping 75 basis points from last week. So we've taken out about almost one full cut. But again, it all feels like it's TBD. That front end is very much where all the whippy action is going to be, guys.
And this gets to an idea of whether the market rally, the equity market rally, is also a bit of TBD. We talk about this idea of a new bull market sort of taking a foot, at least for the NASDAQ 100. And you look at what rose today, a 7% gain in this Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. But at the same time, you had that 7% gain in Dow Transport. So you had a lot of sectors today that, at least in the eyes of investors, seem to be getting more of a long-term reprieve, whether it's chip stocks, whether it's in the travel space or in the consumer durable space.
Absolutely. There's still a lot of uncertainty, right? I was thinking about what David Bahnsen just told Alix and Romaine about how before, when you had 145% tariffs on Chinese imports, that was basically a trade embargo. Now you have some trade. It's not back to what it was. So something is better than nothing, but there's still a lot of question marks, and it's not like companies are going to be rushing to offer new updated guidance.
Yeah, well, in terms of guidance, we're going to get some reads on inflation this week, CPI and PPI. And so we'll see whether or not the Fed's going to be in a little bit of a trickier situation, because even if the tariffs aren't as onerous as it seems to be going, especially when we look at what's going on between U.S. and China, we are going to be in a higher tariff environment. And so what does that mean overall for inflation longer term?
I'm just curious, though, too. I mean, we're also going to get some earnings reports this week, including from Walmart. I think we get a lot more in terms of the retail space the following week. But you do get some companies that are going to have some insights into what's going on with trade and whether they were impacted, like a Walmart, like a Cisco, and a few others that I'm forgetting. I think Birkenstock is in there. Oh, Deere, that's the one I was thinking of as well. Yeah.
Well, we were talking with Nancy Lazar earlier.
Just thinking about that.
And she was saying you won't. She doesn't think you'll see a recession. She's pretty optimistic about this, but she does think you'll see a freight recession. And our own Bloomberg economics geoeconomist Jennifer Welch said that even with tariffs at only 30%, there could be a 60% drop in shipments from China. And then lastly, I just want to add that Wendy Cutler this morning from the Asia Society, she worked with trade for many years and negotiated a number of bills, said that this 30% is additive, right? We're looking at a trade-weighted tariff on Chinese goods already of 20%, and this will go on top of that.
Did anyone see that kind of went viral over the weekend that someone had posted at the Los Angeles port, how that for the first time in a few years, they had a day where they actually did not get a single container ship coming in?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
We have to wonder, though, if we wind up getting some kind of, if this deal is enough for the optimism, does that change very quickly? Or is delayed until something else happens? Or then we all of a sudden get a push forward of buying?
I think we're in a situation where it always feels like there's another shoe to drop, because anything could change, right? I mean, for leverage, for any kind of opportunity to extract more concessions, nothing's ever certain.
But wasn't there some degree of encouragement? I mean, the idea that a couple weeks ago, Trump couldn't even get Xi on the phone, and now we had high-level talks between U.S. and China, and if you believe Trump, maybe a potential phone call between those two world leaders later this week.
But there should have been back-channeling all along. Our expectations are lowered by so much.
They are. They're very low, Scarlet.
It's still hope, right? And again, the clock is just set for 90 days. When I see the signatures, right, or
I still think you could get a resurgence in shipments. If you look on the terminal, you can type map vessels go, and you'll see how many ships are just sitting offshore off the coast of China, just waiting to go.
Tim has a good point. I really agree with him.
Don't you like his new glasses?
I do. But he lost some hair.
Yeah, his hair's changed a little bit too. All right, that's a wrap across platform coverage. Radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We call it the closing bell. Matt and I continuing here on Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
You guys look fantastic.
We've got Scarlet and Romaine continuing on TV, and Alix is heading out. Yeah, not bad, right? You look good there.